Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you guys here. Today is the 28th, Thursday, the 28th of March, 2024. Thank you for tuning in. Now, we're going to get started here and we're going to take a look at what's going on. This is a dangerous situation because Russia is not accepting that the Islamic State launched the Moscow attack. It says Russia-Ukraine war. Russian Foreign Ministry claims it's extremely hard to believe. In other words, we can't believe it. We don't believe it. Or we can't believe it that the Islamic State could launch such an attack. Russia says, Russia officials. Russian officials have repeatedly cast doubt over who was behind the attack, despite IS claiming responsibility and Western intelligence evidence that this is what they're believing in Russia. It says Russian foreign minister says it's hard to believe Islamic State could launch the Moscow attack. It says Russian foreign minister spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said in her weekly press briefing that it's extremely hard to believe that the Islamic State would have the capacity to launch the attack on a Moscow concert hall last Friday that killed 140 people. Russian officials have repeatedly cast doubt on Western intelligence assertions that IS was responsible for the attack. So where does that leave us? It leaves us in a situation where, of course, the attack did happen, and the Russians are saying to themselves, well, who did it? If they're not accepting that the Islamic State did it. So we have this war going on in Ukraine, and Russia repeatedly in here, if we look in the latter part of this, it says Russian strikes killed 3 and injured dozens more across the region of Ukraine. Ukraine's foreign minister has called for urgent deliveries of air defense systems in the wake of the strikes. So there's still a war going on between Russia and Ukraine, and I think that the Russians, says Russian officials have repeatedly cast doubt on Western intelligence assertions that IS was responsible for the attack, and have instead suggested that Ukraine and Western countries played a role in it, without providing evidence. So, let's just put it this way. Anyway, we're going to move on and take a look at this. Florida is banning social media for kids under 14. That's what the plan is, I guess. It says, will the bill hold up? I find this very interesting because look, if they pass the bill, I'm just saying, if they pass this bill and kids under 14 are not allowed to use social media, kids under 14, they know more about computers than we do. I'm basically still sort of computer illiterate compared to a 6-year-old. When it comes to software and computer, knowing how to work their way through the internet, a 6-year-old has more skills than I have. I'll be the first to admit it. You hand them a cell phone and pow, 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 pow. They can go through all the apps and everything on it. I don't know where to start on a cell phone. I get lost. I don't even I have a hard time muting my cell phone to keep it from ringing and stuff like that, compared to these kids. So they're going to ban it for kids under 14. 14-year-old kid, I mean, that's getting to be a big kid. Remember when I was 14, I thought of myself as a man already. When I was 14 years old. And I was taking responsibilities that men generally take at 14. So a 14-year-old kid, you're really dealing with a young adult there. And being as they know the internet like they do, I mean, they know you could be dealing with a hacker at 14 years old, for crying out loud. Somebody who's just unbelievable internet skills. So who's going to take the fall for this? If you get some kid in the family and he's basically breaking the law. Say they put this law in. I'm just going to the next step now. They put this law in Florida, not allowed under 14. Who's going to take the fall for it? Are the parents going to take the fall if some kid's actually breaking the law repeatedly? Is the fall for it going to come back on the parent? So who's going to take the fall? The kid going to take the fall? I mean, and what's the penalties going to be? There's a whole lot of questions that come up here with this. Is it just going to be fines, or is it going to be something more than just fines if kids under 14 go on the internet? Because, you know, they're going to do it. They get the power in their hands. They get the cell phone in their hands. They're going to do it. The kids are going to do it. I mean, it's especially when you make it forbidden fruit. Oh my gosh, they'll be on there 24/7. Anyway, just saying, just what I think about this. You know, some of my thoughts. Now, Haiti is in a mess. Total mess in Haiti. Have you guys heard about it? 2 weeks after the country's prime minister resigned following a surge in violence at Port-au-Prince. Evidently, they're taking up guns, gangs taking over, and everything else going on, you know. Surges in violence, tremendous surge in violence. This is what an awful lot of countries now that are never experienced anything like this before. Did a show yesterday. I talked about the fall of the former Soviet Union, and this is what happened. And basically, when you have a collapse of society, this violence takes over and gangs form. This is what happens. So look for this to happen, because we're in the collapse of the entire world right now. So if you get the United States collapses like the former Soviet Union collapsed, if that were to happen, it would spread to the whole world, because the whole world's economy is tied into the United States. And you could look for this kind of situations to spread around the world. Meanwhile, 783 million people right now are going hungry. And 1/5 of all the food is just going to waste. This is the kind of world we live in. This is the kind of world. Now, this is straight from the United Nations. 783 million people going hungry, and 1/5 of all the world's food, enough to feed the 783 million people, is just going to waste. It's rotting in a dump. This is the kind of disorganized world we live in. We created this system slowly over like 7,000 years. But it hasn't been created in an organized way. It's just like, okay, the explorers come out, you know, like Columbus, you know, come to America or whatever. The explorers went out, they planted their flags, and, you know, they went deep inside the continents and stuff, and they started buying and selling land to each other and stuff like that, the land that they claimed, you know. And they just basically went into a new area, you know, like, and they'd say, okay, there's a brook over there and there's a field over there. We'll call this Brookfield, you know. And then what they did is later a town was established in that area, you know, and then it grew into a city, the city of Brookfield. And they had all these signs made up and everything else from what was once just a brook and a field. You know, and it becomes something, and it becomes big. It becomes a big major metropolitan area called Brookfield or whatever, you know. I mean, you can put that example to any other of these places around, you know, and when they first come in, they plant their flags, and then later they put up their fences and they section the land off for themselves. And so what we're seeing is this is built up over thousands of years. This society we've built, and it's so so structured poorly in such ways that it lets 783 million people go hungry while all the food rots in the dumps. But it's just so disorganized and so fragile. In some ways, this system is fairly resilient. It can take a natural disaster or something like that, catches the people off guard, maybe a Category 5 hurricane or whatever, like Katrina was a massive one that went into Louisiana a few years back. And we will reorganize and restructure because we're quite resilient in a way. But in another way, we're also so fragile. It depends on how we get hit and what hits us. You know, one solar flare from outer space could knock out all of our power grid. And then where would we be? Then this whole system that we built over thousands of years comes crumbling down. Who can rebuild it, especially if we've totally relied on telecommunications for people to maintain that structure and order? Relies upon telecommunications entirely now. And once that's broken, with the disorder, how do you even fix it then with the disorder that would ensue? It's okay. Let's move on because I don't want to get bogged down too much. Donald Trump, it says, he assails judge and his daughter after gag order in New York hush money criminal case. I got questions about this. You know, it's very, very unusual the way we communicate too. A lot of people never think about it. We actually have something in our throat called vocal cords. And what we do is kind of like, you know, when kids go out in the lawn and they pick a little piece of grass and they put it between their fingers and they blow on it and they vibrate and make sounds. We blow air by our vocal cords and make sounds, make into the air. And we have actually established this by the way we form and shape our mouths and stuff and the way we move our tongues and stuff. We're able to actually make these make these sounds that we create into something meaningful that others can understand. It's very, very unusual form of communication, to say the least. And we're becoming very, very sensitive to these auditory sounds that we create with our vocal cords. And so in this case, what's happened here is this is a hush money criminal case. What does hush money mean? It means that they don't want you to make those sounds with your vocal cords. And hush money would mean that they're actually going to pay somebody money, or what we call money that's not even really money. It's just printed paper. Got to pay them these printed paper things that's not even really money, so that they don't push air past their vocal cords to make these auditable sounds into the air, right? So what's interesting about this is they're having a criminal trial about the payment of alleged hush money. And what they're doing is then they're going to do what's called a gag order, which means they don't want Donald Trump to make these communicable sounds with his vocal cords by moving air through his vocal cords. So it's a gag order on a gag, basically a gag order on a gag order, or a hush order on a hush order. The whole thing, when you look at it that way, it starts to seem kind of opens up your eyes and say, hey, this is kind of weird, you know? This is really weird. But that's the world we live in again, a very strange world. But depending on how you look at it, it becomes even stranger, you know? So I'm not going to make light of this. Donald Trump, it says, assails judge and his daughter after gag order in New York hush money criminal case. So I think that, I mean, when I was a kid, they used to say something. They used to have a saying out there. And I remember I was only like about maybe 5 years old when they first told me that saying, because I went to school and the kids were saying mean things and stuff. They said, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. And the older generation had kind of that belief, but now we're moving into a different age now, where basically I look at it overall, just taking the whole picture overall and lumping it together, it's kind of like now words can get you in big trouble. You have to be so very careful. Like on this channel, I have to be so very careful about how I choose my words, how I basically vibrate my vocal cords. It was nicer back when you could basically say a lot more things, like a few years ago, back when it wasn't such a world where everybody scrutinized every darn thing you say, It was nicer back then. And, I mean, in one way, you have to think, hey, if this gets a lot worse than it is now, and it can, I mean, they could get it to the point where you say some things and it would and you'll disappear from society. They could get it to that point in the end where there's such a crackdown on verbal communication. But this is how we compare to one another. This is how we understand one another. We have to be able to have freedom of thought in order to organize structure, and this is how we built this society in the first place. I mean, maybe it wasn't pretty when the cavemen were starting to very first put a society together, and they were becoming farmers instead of being hunter-gatherers. And maybe the first time they shot their caveman bow or something, or maybe they stubbed their toe or something and let out a bunch of curse words. Well, what if they had a jail over there, put everybody in jail that says the curse word? We would never got nothing done. I'm just rambling on right now a little bit, but let's move on. The latest death toll climbs after airstrikes and rockets fire on Lebanon-Israel border. So, see, this is to the north. They're fighting right now in Gaza. Fighting tooth and nail in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip. But this is to the north of Israel, in Lebanon. And the Lebanese right now are engaging with airstrikes and rocket fire with Israel on the Lebanon-Israeli border, and that's what's going on right now. It says the death toll from Israeli airstrikes across the southern Lebanon has climbed to 16, including several militants and members of paramedic groups, according to Lebanese state media on the militant organizations. And in northern Israel, one man was killed in a barrage of at least 30 rockets fired by Lebanese militant groups, Hezbollah, which said it was responding to deadly airstrikes targeting paramedic center linked to a Sunni Muslim group. So there we go. I mean, the war is very, very close. It's been close for a while now, of erupting into Lebanon to the north. Now we're going to take a look at the financial markets today. Silver's at $24.83. It's up 23 cents on the day so far. So it's getting back up near $25 again. I consider this to be the best place, the best safe harbor in a storm. And we are coming into one heck of a storm. Financial storm. This is a safe harbor, and you want to take advantage of any safe harbor you can in this kind of a storm. So anybody who doesn't have any silver, just take a look at the fundamentals of it, is what I'll say to you. Taking a look at gold today. Gold has excellent fundamentals as well. But in one way, there is actually probably more gold out there than there is silver. We were to go out there right now into the world and say, okay, we want to gather all the gold together in all the vaults everywhere on Earth and everything and make a big stack out of it. And we want to do the same with silver. Believe it or not, you'd probably have a bigger stack of gold than you would silver. Now, that's not saying that the mines do not produce more silver every year than gold. They do. But it's all consumed. It's all accounted for. They need, this factory needs silver and that factory, and they just suck it right up from the mines as soon as it comes out. So they're using it up a lot more. Where gold, gold ends up more going into vaults and stuff in the bar form and everything. A lot of people don't know that. They say, well, why is the price like 80 times for silver's 80 times cheaper? And imagine that, like 80 times cheaper. It really shouldn't be, because it comes out of the ground about 10 to 1. So it should be silver right now at 10 to 1 should be $221 an ounce. If it came out according to, that's the way it was all the way through history. It should have been at that rate, the gold to silver ratio. But it's not. But I am a believer, a true believer in this, along with a lot of others, that this ratio is going to come back to more of a normal range where it's been throughout history. And in fact, I actually believe it's going to, for a very short period in time, it might actually overshoot and go to an abnormally on the other way. And I've been saying this for years. I think it's actually going to go 4 to 1 just for a very short period in time before it goes back to more normal ratio. But by that time, we might be looking at like $8,000 gold. Okay? By the time it does that. And there's going to be also at the same time, there's going to be an awful silver shortage during that period in time. There's going to be industry out there that maybe even can't make their products. And the governments are very likely during that period in time probably going to say, hey, you know what? The average Joe's not allowed to buy silver anymore. We need it. It was all allocated for us. You can't buy retail. Like the retail gold and silver guys will not be able to sell to you without a license. This is what I think's coming when silver gets to that price. Oh yeah, they'll buy it. And you'll be allowed to sell it, I think. But you're not going to be able to waltz into your coin dealer and say, I want to buy a tube of silver. He's going to say, well, where's your license? I need your government ID and license if you want to buy it. Probably. It's going to be something like that. I'm just saying, guys. So $71,000 for Bitcoin. Now, I talked a little while ago, on one of my shows, I said that we were going to have that little, what we had there, a little price correction. We're still in the bull market. Told you guys we're in the bull market. Pretty much told you guys when I thought it was going to go back up again. I'm sitting here looking at the price of $71,000, and I'm sitting here thinking, my gosh, that's one heck of a price to buy for some air. Basically, a computer algorithm. It's almost unbelievable that a computer algorithm could go that high in price. And to think somebody out there paid like 8,000 of those for a pizza, but they didn't know what it was going to do. And I can totally understand that, because back in those days, it was more in the realm of like, these guys that have own comic book stores and stuff, and they sell cards like Magic the Gathering cards and the Pokemon cards and stuff like that. That's the realm that Bitcoin was in. It was in that novelty realm back then. And I think they were like a nickel a piece or something, or a penny a piece or something for them. Nobody knew. If anybody had known, had any clue, that inclination even, that it was going to do this. But the only reason it did this is because of mismanagement of the fiat currencies. Now, that mismanagement's not went away. In fact, the situation's got worse over the years, and it's coming to a conclusion. there's nothing else. When we see the fiat currencies finally reach their demise and they end in a hyperinflation, there's going to be no place to escape them except for gold, silver, and cryptos. And that's a very narrow avenue. So what you basically got is, it's like a stadium, an Olympic-sized stadium full of people in there partying or whatever, and there's like two little exit doors, one on either side. One says crypto, one says gold, silver, on either side of the stadium. All it takes is somebody in the stadium to yell fire and a bit of smoke to be in the stadium. What's going to happen? They're all going to run for the exit doors. But the exit doors are very cramped. They're very small, hard to get through, because, well, not normally. Normally it'd be easy to get through the exit door, but nobody's trying to escape. But what happens when the whole world tries to escape fiat at once? Through these tiny little exit doors. It could drive these prices up on these things, gold, silver, cryptos. They could actually be like a panic to get them. An absolute panic. Well, if you see your dollar losing value really fast, and you're all in dollars, everything you got, you're going to be, if you got a lot of money, and a lot of these people are billionaires, they're not going to just sit there and say, hey, you know what? I'm fine with 20% inflation daily. Well, that's what a hyperinflation's like. You can actually lose 20% of the value of your dollar daily. And then they see crypto going up daily in price or its value, equal to, if not gaining on the loss of the dollar. Well, they're going to be desperate to get out of one thing and into another at that point. And it can happen suddenly. But it's not something that's been building for years. It's been building and building and building for years. But the final end of it could come rather quickly and cause some sort of a panic. But this is already $71,000 before any crisis even. Imagine what it could do, I mean, this is why I've told you guys for a very long time. I've said, hey, listen, Bitcoin's going to do one of two things. It's either you're going to lose all your money you got invested in it, or it's going to succeed at becoming the big thing, the big cheese. And if it succeeds, why, you wouldn't need very much. Just, I don't know, probably just like 4% of one coin or something might be enough, or 10% of a coin might be enough. Even 1% of a coin might be. Because think about it, really, a Satoshi, which is 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin. It breaks down that small, What if a Satoshi was worth $1? Then 1% of a Bitcoin, just 1% of a Bitcoin, would be worth 1,000,000 Satoshis. So like $1 million. If that were to happen. Dow Jones Industrial Average, 39,700. Taking a look at the crude oil today is at 82.53, and it's on its way to $90. It's up $1.18 today, which is quite a big jump. But the inflation's on its way too. I wouldn't be surprised to see $200 crude before long. Keeps on going. This inflation, just once it really gets churning and chugging away, like inflation started to chug away. It went up to, what was it? By their metric, it was over 8%. Then they did all this stuff, raising interest rates, and they did all this quantitative tightening, and they did everything they could all this stuff to slow down the economy and cool the economy off, thinking there was going to be a recession. But at the same time, we saw inflation come down a little bit by their metric. What was it? Come down to 3.8% or something like that? Well, in other words, they cut it in half, but they didn't get rid of it. But now they have to let off the pedal, or the economy's going to blow up. As soon as they let off the pedal, this thing's going to start to heat up again unbelievably fast. And oil is a big part of this, because as we see oil head up to $90 or beyond, it's going to help push the inflation. And then they're forced into cutting rates. That's going to push the inflation. Everything's going to start pushing the inflation. So when we really get rolling this time, we're going to go right on by that 8% metric they had before, and we're going to keep going higher and higher, the inflation. Now, at a certain point, the people out there are going to say, hey, you know what? I'm buying stuff today because tomorrow it's going to be higher in price. And that's what really drives the inflation. That's what really drives is a loss of faith in the purchasing power. Taking a look at our U.S. Treasuries today, we're seeing the U.S. 30-year is down 0.3. The U.S. 10-year is down 1.1 basis points. No, 3 basis points on the U.S. 30-year. So we're looking at falling yields on the long end. We're looking at a U.S. 10-year is only 4.18. If you want a higher yield, you gotta go into a much shorter term. That's called a yield curve inversion. 104.44 on the U.S. dollar index today, and the dollar is going sideways today. It did take a bounce earlier. Thank you guys for listening to my show. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode. And have a great afternoon. Bye-bye.